How can we make sure that employees and people within our organization use technology in the way that we expect? In this video, we're going to cover policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines, as well as how we can use them to make our organization more secure and less chaotic. If this is the first time that we're meeting, my name is John Good. I'm a cybersecurity professional, trainer, YouTuber, all the above. If you like the video, remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for the YouTube algorithm. See the description for resources related to this video and other ways to show your support for the channel. Also, join me on my Discord channel. The link is in the description down below. All right, let's get into the video. First and foremost, implementing policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines helps us to formalize our expectations. It's not enough for us to just simply state our expectations verbally. We need that written documentation to help conceptualize our expectations, and so those users can actually reference back to our policies and our words. These also help us to reduce complexity because we have to be clear with our words. Otherwise, policies, for example, won't be followed because they're confusing and people can't understand them. These set of documents also help us to get reliable and consistent results. Think about a backup procedure. We can document all the steps in such a detailed manner that somebody brand new to our team can actually execute that task. The documents also provide a hierarchical organization by forming documents at the appropriate level. For example, a senior manager won't know the step-by-step procedures to perform a backup, but they can actually develop a policy about backups. Now, a security policy defines the scope of security, defines the assets that need protection, and the extent to which security solutions will provide protection. Policies are also written in a broad manner. They're not going to be super detailed like a procedure document. They're going to state the overall objective. All roles and responsibilities related to those security policies also should be provided. What's the role of a frontline manager? What's the role of the senior managers? And so on and so forth. The roles should never list an individual name, such as Joe Smith. They need to actually reference the role or the job function. That way, if that role changes, the person in the role, we don't have to update the policy. And last but not least, the policies need to include the compliance or audit requirements in the policies so people know what to expect. When it comes to types of policies, we have three major types of policies. The first one is the organizational security policies, and these are written for across the organization. So something like an acceptable use policy that applies to everybody in the organization. We also have issue-specific policies, and these focus on a specific issue. So maybe a network service, a department, a function, or some other unique aspect. And then we have system-specific policies, and these are going to focus on individual systems or types of systems. You might state like the approved hardware or software, or even how the system is locked down. We have three categories of policies as well. We have the regulatory policies, and these are actually regulatory requirements or legal requirements that have to be met by our organization. We also have advisory policies, and these outline acceptable behaviors and define those consequences for those violators. And then we have informative policies, and these provide knowledge or information about a specific subject, maybe the mission statement or even company goals. It's important to note that most policies are going to fall into the advisory policy category. Let's move on to standards now. So standards define requirements for technology such as hardware or software and security controls. By using standards, we're implementing a consistent standard of technology, and we ensure that things are going to work together. Think about if you were using all Windows computers in your company, and then all of a sudden somebody decides to implement an Apple computer. Now all of a sudden we have issues like patching, configuration management, and some others that we have to worry about. And that isn't to say that you can't implement new technologies or adapt, but you just have to make sure that all the technology choices that you're implementing align with each other and they'll work together. Baselines. Now, baselines define a minimum level of security that has to be met by the organization. An example would be that if we set a baseline that all systems will be at least Windows 10 or Server 2012 operating systems, well, we have to meet that requirement. With baselines, remember that these are minimums. So in our example that we just had, you could have a Windows Server 2016 or 2019. You just have to at least meet that minimum requirement, that baseline requirement. And of course, with baselines, that helps shape our minimum security requirements. If we know that you have to use at least a Windows 10 or Server 2012 implementation, then obviously a lot of the legacy controls that were in Windows 7 and before that, we know that those aren't going to be relevant. Now, guidelines, these are recommendations on how to implement standards and baselines. So the important distinction here is that with guidelines, guidelines are not a requirement. Okay, make sure that you commit that to memory. For example, a guideline might say that we need a specific audit reduction tool in a certain area or to monitor certain things, but it doesn't actually call out something like Splunk. And then finally, procedures. Procedures are those step-by-step instructions to implementing security. We might also actually refer to these as standard operating procedures or SOPs. For example, we might have an SOP on how a system is imaged and deployed. It's going to have that step-by-step instruction. So click here, press this, all those kind of detailed steps. Procedures help us guarantee consistency in results. For example, if we have that same deployment scenario and it's not documented, people might do things very differently than each other and we'll end up with different results. That's not good when it comes to security. We actually want very consistent procedures. Some of the common issues that you might actually see in a real organization are companies might have procedure documents, for instance, wrapped up into a policy document or some other document that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Policies might not be detailed enough, so they might have implied knowledge. You really want to get away from that implied knowledge. You want it to be so that the most junior person or a brand new person that comes into the role can actually execute that task. That's how detailed they need to be. And then also, you might see procedure documents that haven't been updated or that are inaccurate. For example, if your company all of a sudden chooses a different software package or a different way of doing things, these procedure documents have to get updated. Procedures are going to make up the majority of your documentation in your program. Each procedure needs to be a separate document and updated as they change. That's why you don't put them in policies, because procedure documents actually will change a lot more frequently than a policy will. And again, you need to make sure that procedure documents are so detailed that a brand new person to your team can walk in and actually execute that procedure. So something that's actually pretty interesting and a good idea is that if you get a new person to your team, you actually want that person to be the champion of some documentation, because they get those fresh eyes and they can make sure that step by step can be executed by somebody that has no knowledge walking into the whole task. And then just a reminder, again, remember that the procedure documents have to be updated as technology or processes change. So if that occurs within the year, make sure that they're updated. Otherwise, also make sure that they're reviewed on an annual basis. Question of the day: which types of policies do you think cause the most issues in organizations? Let me know in the comments down below. Remember to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.